Captain Picard. Priority 1 message from Starfleet coming in on secured channel.
My Readier Room.
Hello and welcome to the Readier Room, the only and longest running Star Trek The Next Generation rewatch podcast. Every week we're coming at you with on-the-set stories and forbidden lore about the Next Generation, otherwise known as the Greatest Generation. My name is Mitchell Mells, Chief Consultant of Services at Paramount, and with me is my life partner, Brandon Hobbs. How are we today? It's still summer. It's still hot. How you holding up?
Oh, yeah. Oh, it's hot. We got a little bit of a storm brewing outside, so hopefully the power doesn't cut out while we're recording this.
That would be embarrassing.
But, it would be. We would be forced to upload it as is, because that's part of our contract.
There's really no point to doing any kind of editing anyway, I like to think.
All right. I mean, I guess it's kind of like, we give you the raw, unfiltered. We're real. You know, we're not like the other girls.
We raw dog it.
We raw dog it. That's a great way of putting it. I've never heard anyone say that before.
Right. You see the other podcasts, they edit out the 7-second intervals of unlistenable silence, but not us.
Yeah, or the heavy breathing.
Right.
The awkward waiting for a joke to land. The
we want to
racism.
We want to give you the experience of, I'm on one of your ears, Brandon's on the other, and you can hear us directly coming into you. You feel the breathing on your earlobes. Right.
Actually, we may start having a segment where we eat on the podcast. We've been discussing this.
I heard about this. My grandson was telling me it's like asthma. You were saying?
Yeah. That sounds about right. I guess people get off to hearing people's mouth sounds.
Right. Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
I have a bottle of seltzer water here, and I'm going to drink it, perhaps sensually, for the audience.
And really, it's for me too, which is nice.
I hope that was appealing.
Wow, that was something.
Speaking of something, you'll never guess what I have for you.
A question of the week?
I have a question of the week. So, this week's
Let's hear it.
This week's question comes from one Cindy in L.A. And Cindy asks, did they ever settle the class action sexual harassment lawsuit against Jonathan Frakes?
Oh, no.
I don't know much about your podcast, but I need the answer to this. And Cindy, that's a great question, as they all tend to be. So, pretty hardcore. This is something hardcore fans might not even know. But Frakes had quite a bit of legal trouble following his behavior on set towards the end of the series run. Because as we were ramping up, Frakes, first of all, he was always the same no matter what, but as we were ramping up, he kind of had more star power, right? Like, he was one of the leads, the show was gaining success. Nobody really wanted to come at him, but towards the end of the run, that seltzer water's catching up with me. Towards the end of the run, the popularity of the show was waning a bit, and Frakes didn't have the same, golden halo that he did before. So people felt a little more emboldened, a little more confident to take him down, and suddenly they just started popping up like prairie dogs out of the ground. Just dozens and dozens of old female extras or guest stars or even members of the crew who all accused Frakes of the same sexual misconduct.
Right. And, that many people can't be wrong.
No. On Trek set, we always believed women, and even back then. Frakes...
Yeah, we were a little ahead of our time.
We were. We didn't believe Frakes very, very much about just about anything. But he got kind of belligerent in response to this. the show was on its way out anyway, so it wasn't something anybody had to deal with for that long of a time. But anyway, they did settle the lawsuit, and Frakes had a pretty hefty payout that he had to do, and all of his Trek money was kind of down the drain, which is why he just afterwards he started taking basically any job that he could. Actually, very big super fans will know that Jonathan Frakes was in Star Trek Picard, and this is after he swore off doing any more Trek stuff. But he needed the money, and obviously they were willing to pay to get him into it, just because the fans just want to see people that they know. And yeah, so if you're happy as a Star Trek fan that Frakes was in Star Trek Picard, you can thank his sexual misconduct for that, and his need to pay off literal scores of spurned and harassed women.
Yeah, it is. It's interesting how even bad decisions can come around and have a really great positive effect on the world.
Mistakes and the miracles, really.
Absolutely.
So, great question, Cindy. I hope that if you're entitled to a payout, you get what you deserve. And if not, well, Frakes certainly got what he deserved. If you guys at home, you have a question of the week that you want us to answer, well, you don't know if your question is of the week yet, but if you have a question you want us to answer, then feel free to send us an email, thereadierroom@gmail.com. That's with a capital T and 2 capital R's. Or you can DM us on Twitter. Or if you go to our what was the name of it? Our Friendster site. You'll find us there too. So anywhere you want to contact us, we're accepting questions of the week. Maybe it'll be of the month. Who knows if it's a truly monumentous question.
Right. We'll ask it once every week for 4 weeks. Exactly.
And it's that kind of creativity that we want to celebrate and cultivate amongst the
Definitely.
fans. So
definitely. Yeah, that'll be whoever gets to the first question of the month, I think we'll send them a shirt or something, some kind of merch.
Yeah. Actually, so look out for some new merch premiering after this week's episode. I don't want to spoil you on what the shirt's going to be, but there's certainly something to look forward to.
Yeah, I think you'll know it by the end of this episode. You'll be able to pick up on what it's going to be.
Exactly. So send us your best questions, your bestions. All right. So that will take us to this week's episode, and we're still mired in season 2.
We are mired.
After 1 week, it has not ended. Somehow. Where Silence Has Lease,
Where Silence Has Lease.
Where Silence Has Lease. This episode title, I don't know why it was chosen. It's very vexing. I know it's from a poem.
I'm not sure either. I haven't read the poem. I'm sure you haven't either. So
no.
If there is some context in there that would tell us why it was chosen, we certainly don't know it.
Well, here's the thing, right? There's no place in this episode that's featured prominently. It's not about the location. Whereas the title obviously alludes to a place. I believe the poem itself was written about, like, the Yukon. Some kind of Arctic location. Whereas this is more about an entity who is not Silence.
Yeah. I mean, does Silence have lease at all in this episode?
Well, what is Silence leasing this place from is the bigger question.
Right. I mean, I guess you could go the easy route and, just make it a dichotomy. The absence of silence, it would be leasing from. True,
but isn't silence the absence of noise? This is a hot, cold situation.
Sure. It's the same thing, isn't it? So
what, heat and noise?
Well, yes, kind of, but no. I mean, they're both energy, aren't they?
We are energy.
Yeah, yeah. Well, we're getting a little too Trek right now.
Sorry.
Um,
So
we have a cool bottle episode.
a cool bottle episode?
Yeah, it's a bottle episode, right?
Is this some
Uh,
fan lingo I'm not privy
well,
to?
no. You've been through the industry. It's an industry term. Low budget, kind of standard sets, few guests, that kind of thing.
You know I don't talk to anybody when I'm at work.
Yeah, and I find that Star Trek is almost honestly at its best during these low budget episodes.
Yeah, well, Star Trek is more. It's better when it's about the dynamics between people, or at least entities,
Right.
politics, mental battles, stuff like that.
Mhm.
And that's obviously very cheap to execute. You just need a good
Yeah,
script.
it's really, I mean, a lot of it comes down to a feeling of exploration, a feeling of mystery. I know Maurice loved this episode. We had Winrick directing, Rick, who would he'd go on to date Janeway actually.
In the show?
And well, not in the show, but in real life.
I see.
And we see him again a few times, notably the series finale he directs. And he actually spent, I mean, because it is a bottle episode, he spent a lot of time, and you notice this as you're watching, a lot of time directing the movement, the action of the characters, so as to kind of have them move around more than they usually would on the bridge, because so much time is spent on the bridge.
Right.
Which is actually really hard to do from a wheelchair. So I mean, I remember being impressed by that, watching how he was able to take what some might consider, after 40 minutes on it, a boring set, and actually make it pretty dynamic.
Well, the trick was that he used one of those old-timey funnels that directors used to shout into to project their voice, so people could hear him from the wheelchair, because you couldn't get it on set.
Right.
Now, you're right. It is visually interesting, despite the lack of overt action, which is a strength of the episode, and certainly something that we can pin on the director. So it's not easy to do that, because there's a lot of boringly shot Star Trek.
Yeah, there certainly is, especially coming out of season 1.
Yes, like all these flat camera angles for characters just sit in chairs and maybe they swivel.
Right. Speaking of chairs,
I'm in for this. I don't know what you're going to say, but I'm into this.
I need to point this out because I don't know if we're going to be able to deal with it, but in Picard's room, we see. I think we spent a lot of time trying to not have this happen on camera, where you would see the wheels on a chair.
Yeah, it takes you out of it.
It does, doesn't it? Although there's nothing to suggest really that we would evolve beyond wheeled chairs on a starship. You know what I mean?
It's funny.
I mean, what's really the point?
It's funny because it cuts both ways. On one hand, there's this part of your brain that thinks, "Oh, what? That's the same chair that I have at home. What the hell?" And then if they were to have this futuristic floating chair made with like silicone, you'd think, "What? Even the chairs have to be futuristic?"
Yeah. Well, I mean, and also consider the chair you're sitting in right now isn't all that different from a chair a few hundred years ago. So
this is true. But that's the weird thing about doing something creative for a general audience, is that at some point you have to accept the audience's illogical way of thinking and cater to that, because even if people will examine it and realize it's kind of dumb to think that way, the fact that their first instinct is, "Oh, these chairs, they're not futuristic, what the hell?" That's what you're fighting against. And
Yeah, for sure.
and as somebody managing the expectations of an audience, it's not enough to just say no, you're wrong. Your way of thinking is wrong. Even if that's true, it's too much momentum to fight against. And in creative industries, a lot of time is spent acquiescing to something you really shouldn't have to.
Right. That's a fair point.
All right, so this.
But I mean, it certainly bothered me.
I can understand why completely, but it's one of the things that bothers you, and then you get kind of embarrassed about thinking about it. It's like,
yeah.
Maybe I'm the retard.
I know. Yeah, I mean, absolutely, I am. But so what did you think about the conceit of this episode?
I liked the conceit of this episode. I liked the entity character. It's I'm not going to say that it was handled 100% perfectly or that this is a great episode, because I don't think it is. But the general setup of everything and more or less how it plays out, I thought were pretty interesting. Especially the parallel drawn between the two sides at the very end was a nice way to end it.
Right.
Because when you think about, like, okay, you have this curious entity that's doing some kind of research on lower life forms, well, it certainly makes sense that they would really not have much regard for the lives of that lesser life form, and they would just kind of more or less cruelly experiment on them. And that because that's just what human beings do. Like,
right.
For obviously, standards are different at different points in society, but like live experimentation on animals is something we have a long history of. So it just makes sense that would extend one level higher, because I always I get frustrated when fiction has this idea that intelligence, capability, and ethics all scale linearly with each other. Whereas,
right.
Like, oh, this is a higher life form, so of course they're going to have a higher ethical code than us, and that doesn't necessarily follow. So seeing this thing, which is clearly well beyond humanity or most life forms in the Federation, just not really have much of an ethical code, at least the one that matches that of the main characters. That makes a lot more sense. That seems a lot more real in this science fiction show.
That's a good point too, and I mean, we've more or less proven too that intelligence kind of scales along with the capability of being cruel.
Right, exactly. So if anything, they're inverse.
Right. So it's that's a really good point. That you're probably far more likely to run into a being of higher intelligence that has very lax moral codes when it comes to dealing with lesser life forms, right?
And it does that without being overtly evil. It's not. Yeah. It's not cackling like, oh, I'm going to kill half your crew, haha. It's just,
right.
I'm going to run this experiment. I'll probably need about a third of your crew, maybe half, but after that, you're good to go.
Yeah. He says, he's like, oh, I'll only need about a third, so it should be fine, right? Yeah, he's almost bargaining.
Right. And
which is interesting.
It's to the point where it's a reasonable enough offer that Worf is like, yeah, let's just do that. If this was a battle,
right,
1/3 of our crew that's a pretty acceptable loss.
Yeah, which is interesting. It's very interesting to have one of your main characters kind of acquiesce to a situation like this.
And this is why these more mental, lower scale conflicts work better for Star Trek, because Star Trek is primed for these ethical dilemmas. All right, well, what do we do? And everyone's got their different outlook because it's a pretty diverse cast of characters. And it makes complete sense that one of them would end up siding with the antagonist, quote unquote.
Right. It's kind of kind of, I think, the first episode we see where Picard is really kind of just morally wrong.
Yeah, I don't
Um,
get the development of this decision. So
mhm.
after Nagilum, the entity, proposes that ultimatum. Not really. Just he asks for a third of their crew as a sacrifice
Uh-huh.
for the experiment. Picard comes to the decision to blow up the ship, and he comes to that decision extremely quickly. So they hold a meeting, and Worf's like, maybe we should give it to him, and somebody says, no, let's not do that. And then Picard says, let's blow up the ship, and then they just go do that. They go prime the self-destruct sequence.
It's an issue of, and I guess Riker does go along with it, but it's an issue of Picard's own sense of pride that he's kind of projecting onto everyone else.
That's exactly what I said. It's a pride thing, which is weird.
Yeah. Which I understand him personally having that, but it is weird, and I think it's maybe a little out of character for him to project that onto the rest of his crew. Where a thoughtful captain might say, "Hey, people would because he didn't announce it to the crew at all, really, do they?
No.
They just kind of decide to arm it and
Let
I mean,
God
I also
sort
have
them
to
out.
bring up that it used to be 5 minutes, but now they can set it to anything they want, which is interesting.
Yeah.
The countdown timer,
Plot hole.
which I mean has been observed by probably 10,000 people before us. So, not exactly an original thing to say, but
it's true.
yeah, it's weird. And now that we've kind of introduced the name of this character, Nagilum.
Great name.
I do have to tell a little anecdote to our audience here. Nagilum as a name, there's a lot of backstory to this, right? It's actually an anagram, right? And it's not as simple as reading it backwards because a few people have posited that, but not really quite the case. So it's an anagram of so the character's name in the first copy of the final draft was Ligma Nu, right? Ligma space NU. Okay, and of course, keeping with Oriental customs, his surname comes first. So Nu is his first name. So when we had these confrontation scenes of this character and we started filming them, Patrick just for some reason he couldn't remember its name. Right, the cameras went on. He just stood up there stuttering like Ligma. What was it?
It's not uncommon, by the way, with the amount of technobabble and fake
not
races.
at all. Not at all. I mean, who could be asked to remember all of these stupid names? I mean, if I weren't getting paid for it, I certainly would not be doing this.
Oh, hell no.
So Patrick is up there, Ligma what, right? And Frakes just pounces, right? He just shouts Ligma balls.
You can see why this was the man who had a class action lawsuit for sexual harassment.
Certainly. And so we all turn to him, and I mean he's basically rolling on the floor thanks to his own joke, and I don't think anyone else was laughing, Mitch. It was a little embarrassing. And we thought, giving him maybe like half an hour to get it out of his system would work, but no. And like every time the character's name would come up, it was Ligma balls, right?
Every fucking time.
Every time. So basically what the writers did was they just jumbled all the letters around, and they actually just got rid of most direct references to the name just to be safe.
You can never be too safe around Frakes.
Yeah, not with Frakes. I have to speak to I don't know if I loved or hated the face.
That's a good question. So conceptually, I think it kind of works when it's this higher entity trying to take on the form of, the races it encounters to better interface with them. Now, the thing is, it's not like a perfect representation of a human face. So, the question then becomes, is the higher entity just incompetent at replicating something it can see? Or what? Or is it an amalgam of the different races on the Enterprise? Because there's Klingons too and androids. I'm not quite sure. To remove the logical thinking about it and just see what's on the screen, I think I like it. It's otherworldly, it's strange, and it's better than a floating head that it would have been had it been more accurate.
Yeah, sure. That is a good point that you raised, though. Is this thing just kind of retarded?
Maybe it's an idiot from that race, and
right. It's kind of just the like an analog to a retarded kid burning ants with a microscope.
Exactly.
Yeah, I mean that's definitely a possibility.
There goes Timmy again. He calls himself Nagilum.
Yeah.
Lord of the Ants.
Nagilum. Yeah, so why don't we take a step back and start with the way this episode opens, because it's a Rykorf episode.
It is a Rykorf episode. Astoundingly. I don't know what to think about the first 3 minutes where they're training on the holodeck for some reason.
Right. Well, I mean, Worf is introducing Riker to his daily regimen, I guess, which would go on to spawn countless works of fan fiction. Famously, there's the one where Riker asks Worf to stand down, and he does not stand down.
What was his
he
plan
stands
there?
straight up.
Hold on. But was he going to kill Riker? Is the idea that Worf cannot be trusted?
He just had so much adrenaline running through him. Well, that's the thing. I mean, he was about to kind of like sexually pounce on Riker
after he killed all the Power Rangers,
right?
Villains.
I mean, yeah. Have you ever killed someone and then kind of gotten like a little bit of an erection?
Yeah, I have.
I know Grand Theft Auto is popular with the kids these days.
Yeah, a game.
Yes, yeah. The video game.
Right, I see.
And I know if I were killing women in that game, it would probably awaken something in me.
What do they call it? Like a power fantasy?
Something like that.
So here's something about this scene. Something I quite enjoy about it. I really like how Michael Dorn plays Worf in these combat scenarios. The posture he takes on, and the way that Klingons are portrayed as being very animalistic, very aggressive. You can see just from the way he stands that it's a lot of physical acting that sheds light on what it means for Worf to be a Klingon and how he's differentiated from the human crew.
Right.
Which it said a lot with very little, which I like.
Right. I think we can attribute that to, Dorn, obviously. He's done a pretty great job up to this point. I think a lot of that was Rick, though, too, in this episode.
That's true.
He was very concerned about the way people were moving, much more so than we usually were. So, yeah, I agree with you. It was cool to see that. And honestly, the whole thing was choreographed pretty well. It was interesting. It was an interesting fight, even if it was not an interesting premise per se. When we open in on the holodeck, that's obviously a holodeck. I don't know if we're supposed to, feel tense or worried for these characters as if they're on some kind of mission. The episode really opens with Troy, once again using her powers to tell an obviously worried Picard that he's worried.
This might be the worst example of this
Well,
that we've seen so far.
I don't know because later on, when the power starts going out and stuff, Troy says, yeah, I do sense something unusual. Which
is it possible that the worst two examples of this are in the same episode?
It's very possible, and I think they are the worst examples.
So, because Picard is literally shuffling around the bridge awkwardly in silence for 30 seconds.
Mm-hmm.
And that is when Troy makes the observation that he's worried about something. Now, what was he worried about? The Rorf situation?
Rykorf.
Right, sorry.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess so. I guess he was worried. Yeah, but why would he be worried?
Exactly. Did he think that
clearly
Worf
set up
was going to kill Riker?
Right, and he almost does, actually, so maybe his worries were well founded. But the whole thing is set up like in spite of itself. Like we're clearly supposed to feel like worried for these characters, but anyone with half a brain would notice that this is a holodeck set.
Right.
So I don't know. It's another opening. We've had a couple of these that really doesn't make sense once you get 5 minutes into the episode.
No, it's all for the spectacle of it.
Yeah.
So,
but luckily we get better from there.
We do. I would say that that's probably the worst part of the episode. Just maybe not in the moment, but overall.
As a piece of the whole. Yeah.
Yeah. Now, here's a question. My memory's failing me, but I really feel as though the set, that holodeck set where that battle takes place, was used in another episode, and I believe a later episode.
Yes. Yeah. Oh, yeah. I want to say it was one of the earliest episodes it was used in, I think.
Well, I'm glad I'm not crazy.
Which one was it? I don't know if it was the pilot or one closely after, but I'm fairly certain that was a reused set. And I mean, it would make sense considering this whole episode was kind of a budget production.
Right. Yeah, I mean, from the set to the costumes of the things that they're fighting.
Right.
It was very cheap.
Yes. Absolutely.
So following that is when the real thrust of the episode is presented, where there's this kind of rift, this hole in space, and nobody can quite identify what it is. It doesn't give out any readings of anything, and any probe they launch into it just disappears. And this is where the greatest mystery, philosophical mystery of perhaps the entire series is presented. Where, and I mentioned this to you, where they want to go intercept that whole thing to get a better look at it and investigate it. But to do this, Picard says to go to half impulse speed for their engines, and they would arrive in 12 minutes. Now, the question is, why not just go to full impulse speed and arrive in 6 minutes?
Having watched this episode once again, I don't know. He's clearly doing nothing else with his time.
Right. It's not as though they needed to prepare for anything.
He's not making tea or anything.
No. Although that would be great. Let's go to half impulse and get there in 12 minutes so I can make some tea in the replicator that makes it instantly.
Yes. Replicate a boiling pot of tea, unboiled.
Well, I need to. That's what Data did, so that he could watch it boil.
Right. That is, yeah.
Just amazing. So, as soon as they get to that rift in space, it basically envelops them, and we're treated to several minutes of them just flying in circles, comprehending that they're in this spaceless space that doesn't really
Mhm.
adhere to
Mhm.
Euclidean ideas.
Yeah, and Dr. Pulaski walks onto the bridge for basically no reason other than the fact that
No reason.
she has to be part of the plot because she's a new character, and once again she's definitely supposed to be this Bones type that comes in and kind of starts shit. So we're treated to a very weird scene between her and Data.
Second one in 2 episodes.
Yeah, that really goes nowhere at all. I mean, it's introduced just to peter out 2 minutes later, so questionable.
Here's an interesting tidbit from that conversation. Pulaski, in eventually accepting Data, because well, first of all, she asks him to zoom in on the view screen, and she turns to everybody else in the room and says, "Does he even know how to zoom in? Does he even know how to do this?" Which is a weird question because it's a fucking computer. It obviously it knows how to do something. But anyway, she ends this exchange by taking a deep breath and saying, "The record says you are alive. I must accept that." Well, why would the record say that Data is alive? I think any science-minded individual would accept that Data's not alive because he's not. It's a machine you can turn off.
Well, it does stretch your interpretation of what living is, but I mean, he is sapient, so is that not life to some degree?
I don't know. It just seems weird to me.
It could just be that the way we define life is very narrow, though, isn't it?
Is it?
I think it is, and I think if you're going into the future, you're probably going to find examples of life not being quite as easily defined, and I think that's perfectly fine. I think that's a cool place to go for sci-fi.
Now, sure. However, this doesn't gel with future depictions of different characters' relationship with Data. For example, there's one episode where somebody from Starfleet is requesting to acquire Data for study purposes,
right,
and insist that he's just property of the Federation. Now, that's not how that episode ends, ultimately, but the fact that that guy had a case at all does not gel with this. Secondly, Data is believed to be destroyed at different times by members of the crew who don't really go on to mourn him at all, which, again, doesn't really fit this idea of Data being alive like everybody else.
Well, I don't know if they're really mutually exclusive, per se.
Like, Data's just a dick and nobody wants to mourn him, even if he is alive.
Data's basically just a slave.
True.
And I mean, I think this does have ramifications going forward. I mean, especially going into Picard and stuff like that. Yeah, I mean, androids are basically slaves.
There's one bit of dialogue that kind of referenced that, and I don't know if it was an episode that was later or if it's one that we saw, but it deals with Data experiencing something like guilt because he wasn't at the bridge 24/7 like he ostensibly could be.
Oh yeah, I think we did watch that one already.
Yeah, which is an interesting point of view to consider while thinking of the androids as slaves, because they could just man the ship throughout all hours of the day.
Right. I mean, they almost deserve to be slaves.
Right, I agree with that.
Or should I say, they are so superior in their ability that they, gosh, how do I even say this? There's no reason for humans to be doing their work, right? So I don't, and they don't really have feelings. I mean, I guess maybe they're in their sapience, they can develop them over the course of years, but out of the box, they don't really have feelings. So,
I don't know how I feel about the idea of androids being able to develop feelings. It's something that I would rather be more binary, in the sense that you either have feelings or you don't. I enjoy a sense of futility hanging over Data's continued quest for humanity. I think that makes it more interesting rather than it just being something that he's slowly progressing to.
Sure. But again, that's another thing I don't find to be mutually exclusive, because there's to a degree emotions are dictated by our biology, but they're also dictated to a degree by society, right? So Data can procure those certain kinds of society dictated emotions, even if they're not necessarily inherent to his being, right? And you can sort of start approaching what is human, even though, I do think that it is futile ultimately, but not entirely, right?
Fair enough. I buy that.
Yeah.
Well, and luckily, that's not at all what this episode is about.
yeah, thankfully. This doesn't get really delved into at all. The doctor insults Data, and then a minute later apologizes and has her entire character arc laid out in the space of that time.
This is preceded, by the way, by one of the best moments of the episode, where Pulaski walks onto the bridge and a minute later asks, "Why am I here? I'm not a bridge officer."
Really such a weird little contrivance to have this character do something. It bothered the hell out of me, I have to say. I did like we have to get these little Data jokes in every once in a while. I did like the she and Data start to discuss the ramifications of, I think it was this space or this dimension not being a dimension at all or something, and Picard comes in and he's like, okay, we'll discuss that like any other time but now, basically.
There were a few overtly humorous moments in this episode.
Yeah.
There's one later on where somebody poses the question, I believe, like, what is death? And Data goes on this tangent about the ending of life or something, and Picard's like, oh, is that all? Kind of flippantly. I found that to be sensibly humorous.
Speaking of Picard being flippant, he's a little flippant this entire episode, isn't he? I mean, at least before Nagilum shows up, he's kind of like just walking around the bridge smirking as the power goes out and people are kind of terrified. Yeah,
and that leads all the way up to him on a lark deciding to blow up the Enterprise. Which I'm still just so vexed over. Why is it preferable to blow up the Enterprise than just lose a third of its crew? I don't get it. It doesn't make any sense, and it also doesn't make sense that that no one did object to it. Really? Earlier in the episode, there's this weird I forget exactly when this conversation takes place, but there's this weird discussion of mutinies. And yes, I believe between Riker and Picard. And Riker says, well, nobody on this ship would mutiny against you, Captain. And then Picard just kind of blows him off. He's like, oh, that's great to hear. Which was also strange. But at the very least, this is like the perfect opportunity for that to pay off in some way, where Picard is considering killing everybody, and then there's some slightly mutinous reaction to that. Right. I mean, I think we were still at the point where, like, intra-crew conflict was not allowed, really. Right. So instead, the Enterprise became a death cult. Right. Literally, we'll do anything. We'll go that far to prevent there being any kind of conflict among the bridge crew, to the point where they just kind of relinquish their lives at the drop of a hat because their captain is too proud to allow his crew
to get 1/3 of them to get sacrificed.
All right, imagine this take on this episode, where instead of the drama of blowing up the ship, we get a scene where Nagilum says, "Okay, I have selected the third of your crew that I'm going to take. I've done something to alert these people, to visibly alert these people that they've been chosen as sacrifices.
Mm-hmm.
And because I'm a higher life form, I'll give you an hour, 2 hours to say your goodbyes." And then there's all this inter-crew drama of people dealing with this in various ways before ultimately, the Picard foils the scheme somehow.
Mm-hmm.
Like, how cool would that have been?
That's an interesting idea, but well beyond the scope of like a 45-minute episode at this point, for sure. So
true, it would need a lot of restructuring to allow that enough time.
They would have had to cut out Pulaski's very important scene for sure.
They would have had to cut out the Rykorf excursion.
Rykorf, yeah. But it could be done. It could be done, and it's a nice idea. Just the way that this was written and the way that this story progressed in rewrites, that it was just never going to happen that way.
Unfortunately.
Yeah, unfortunately. So I found this odd. They run into a Romulan ship, and they immediately just kill it. And Geordi kind of celebrates the death of a bunch of Romulans. Which I mean, I get it, but it seems a little like out of character for someone on the bridge to celebrate death.
Right. I don't think that ever really happens when they win a battle.
Right. It's always like a little more solemn.
Right. The loss of life. And it's great when it's Geordi. Very childlike, not reading the room.
Right. He can read the rainbow, but not the room.
Oh boy. So that happens, and then there's the sister ship of the Enterprise drifts in the view.
And how convenient that it's the sister ship, huh?
Right. Wouldn't you know it? We can just reuse all the same sets.
Yep. So Rykorf ends up walking around basically the Enterprise.
How do you feel about the pronunciation of the ship's name?
The Yamato.
The Yamato.
It's about what I would expect from a 1980s show on network television.
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it. But it still bothered me every single time they said it.
Yeah. I was expecting there to be some kind of like one character would say it one way and another would say it completely differently.
I thought that Data would pronounce it correctly.
Yes. Yeah, me too. I thought he was going for it, but no, it was all Yamato.
So they go to that ship, Rykorf, and there's some cool stuff happening over there where they randomly both hear each other scream. Mm-hmm. It's like, I heard you scream, I came running. I heard you scream. And it doesn't really make sense when you consider the final circumstances of what's happening with Nagilum and all that, but, it's interesting at the time. And then they find the bridge of the sister ship, which is completely ghost town. And when Worf opens a door to maybe the Readier Room or the lift or something, it opens to another room of the bridge.
Right.
That Picard is also not Picard. That Riker is in. So basically, it's once again just like the entire space that that they're inhabiting is a kind of a non-Euclidean thing going on. And this leads to the best single line of dialogue ever in The Next Generation, and perhaps fiction, when Worf, frustrated with the illogical Escher spacing that he's inhabiting, shouts out, "One Riker, one bridge."
Yep.
Which I found wonderful. And apparently, many other people did too. Apparently, this was the beginning of the, quote, "One Riker, one bridge" movement in the fandom, which we didn't know about for a long time.
Yeah, I remember. I mean, we found out like years later, and what a surprise.
Yeah. So what this was a group of fans who were very, very adamant and united over the idea that there should not be any kind of parallel universe, multiple timelines, time travel kind of plots in the show that would ever result in, for example, there being 2 Enterprises or 2 Rikers or whatever it is. Hence the name, 1 Riker, 1 Bridge. And because we didn't know about this, we would have these episodes, every so often. And man, the unadulterated rage this caused in these people.
Yeah.
It was enough that when we finally did hear about it, it was still burning. So what we did was, I think season 7, maybe season 6, we explicitly made an episode where Worf is jumping between many timelines, almost like extremely quickly, putting in as many Worf's, Bridges, and Rikers as we could.
Right.
Just to spite these people.
Yep, absolutely. And the reason it took so long is because the mail we received from these people, from this organization, it would always just say 1 Riker, 1 Bridge, and we had no idea what they were talking about.
Right, because nobody has an encyclopedic knowledge of episodes of Trek. We didn't even realize that was a quote from one of our shows.
Right.
But, of course, looking back on it,
more than anything, it sounded like a threat.
Yeah.
Which I guess it was, wasn't it?
It's true, but in our mind, Frakes wasn't going anywhere. There was only going to be 1 Riker. We didn't redesign the Enterprise, so we were fine. 1 Riker,
yeah, it
1
all
Bridge.
Worked out.
Get yourselves ready for the T-shirt.
Yeah, they're coming, and they're gonna be great.
And they're gonna be gray.
Yeah, they are gonna be gray or blue, whichever one you want.
Exactly.
So on the bridge, one thing I noticed that was really, really cool was you had those typical Enterprise bridge sounds, but like distorted.
Yeah, it did a good job.
Which felt really creepy. It was very cool.
It was uncanny valley kind of thing.
Yes.
Where
very uncanny.
It was the same but a little different, which is the best way to make something unsettling.
As the kids say, it was a liminal space.
Wow.
Right?
Is that what kids are into these days? Liminal spaces?
Yes, they are. And the Enterprise has that in spades when there's no one walking down the hall.
The computers are off, the lights are off. It's just instantly different once you lack the flat lighting that you're accustomed to.
Oh, I'm sorry, I meant the Yamato.
Ah, of course. Well, it's the
Not
sister
the
ship.
Yeah, sister ship. And of course the Yamato. the Yamato does show up later, looking different than it does here. So look forward to that one. Well, if you haven't watched the series before,
here's the thing: is it actually confirmed to be the sister ship, or is that just the assumption? Because obviously it can't be the Enterprise. We're on the Enterprise.
Correct. You are right. You've got to be correct on that. Yes, it's got to be just a copy of the Enterprise, and they think it's the sister ship because it's the only one that would look like the Enterprise from the outside.
Exactly.
Wow. You're very smart, Mitch.
I'm a genius. Oh. No, I fist pumped and said, "Oh."
Oh, I thought you remembered something.
No, I don't remember anything these days.
Yeah, so yeah, then it comes out that he's just testing. Nagilum is just testing the reactions, and of course we get back to square one where he decides he wants to see what death is, right? And I guess this is a pretty famous scene.
It became an internet chief.
A meme, I think. It was a pretty big meme for a while. The death of Ensign Haskell,
who was wearing a red shirt as per Star Trek rules.
Of course. Yep. We made sure that happened. But what people don't know though is that what we got in the end was kind of an amalgamation of 2 different, much more extended scenes, right? Nagilum's kind of disgusted exclamation here when he says, "What are you?" right? this was originally directed toward Ensign Haskell. Maurice wrote this. At the time, he was still very much a Gene loyalist. So, basically, what the scene was a rather excruciatingly drawn out one where Nagilum would just start listing Haskell's physical differences compared to the rest of the crew, right? Dark skin, wide nose. These aren't my words, of course, but nappy hair. And so on, until he eventually got down to his intrinsic qualities, right? Lower IQ, penchant for violence.
It was a full page of the script.
It was a long one. It was a long one. So this all culminated in the scene we know and love, where Nagilum kills Haskell. Although obviously his original motivations were a lot different, right? And of course, we also had the scene where he questions Pulaski as the woman on the bridge, and kind of did the same thing to her. That was another, I guess, half a page, and basically the boys in editing managed to knit both of these scenes down into one, because we needed more time to devote to Picard listening to classical music. But you can't help but think of what could have been.
I think the episode, it could have been double length at that point, but the real shame in all this is that we lost the footage of Haskell's physical acting as Nagilum kind of laid into him, which combined with what we do see in the episode was going to be, it was kind of our mission to get one of our extras the Emmy win, just to show oh man, this show so good, even the extras win the Emmys. Exactly.
It was quite the performance too.
Right. But unfortunately, all we were left with was the death scene, which was good. It was good. But it didn't have the emotional depth that the rest of the exchange had to it. So
because it really made you, well, I mean, depending on the kind of person you were, I guess, either it made you hate Nagilum or it made you love him. Really,
which is the sign of a good villain.
It is. So, yeah, a bit of a loss there, but it's not like the episode can't stand without it.
Right.
And so yes, that's the point where Nagilum decides he's going to kill a third of the crew. They have the meeting, and then we have this really stupid scene, where again Picard is listening to his classical music, and a fake Troy and Data walk into the room to convince him.
But we don't know they're fake. Not until the end.
They shouldn't have been fake. There's these characters should have done this to begin with.
Right. No, they were just ready to die.
It's sad that we couldn't have had a scene where the characters respectfully disagree on killing themselves.
So what was Nagilum's motivation in creating fake Data and Troy to convince Picard not to blow up the ship?
Well, he obviously wanted to experiment on them more.
Right.
The bigger question is, what was his motivation in leaving them alone when he figured out Picard called his bluff?
Yeah. I don't know.
What reason does he have to keep them alive? If I were him, I would just be like, okay, kill yourselves, whatever.
It's
not a loss.
Because he certainly doesn't, they don't earn his respect. He goes on a tirade at the end of the episode listing all the bad traits of humanity.
Which sounds, by the way, like it was written by an autistic cat lady.
Right.
Humans are vile creatures.
They're
impulsive
and violent.
Yes. Not like my heckin' Catarinos.
No, I don't think there is a really good justification for how the events play out. Here's the thing. So, following his failure to get Picard to not blow up the ship, which would be a great example of death as Nagilum wanted to see it, but whatever. He lets them go. He opens a rift back to space, and they fly through it. And Picard is super suspicious of this, to the point where he lets the self-destruct countdown continue until there's like 1 or 2 seconds left, and
Yes.
and then he finally acquiesces and says, "Okay, I'll cancel it."
Mm-hmm.
Which is such a bizarre ego thing. Is I won't be fooled. I'd rather die than be fooled. I must check that this is on the level,
Yes.
even though
Yes.
I could just reactivate the self-destruct sequence if I took it down.
Right. And apparently reactivate it for like 1 second because you can set the time now
Right.
because there is a firmware update. Yeah. That's a good point. And it, like we've said, I mean, it plays to Picard's very kind of messed up character this episode.
Yeah.
I don't mind a character having flaws like that, but it's almost not presented as one.
No, it's not. It's just, here's our primary protagonist, and we're gonna be behind him all the way.
Because the scene that introduces what should have been a logical, rational argument to his actions ends up just being the antagonist messing with him.
Villains who did nothing wrong.
It's just, yeah. I mean, like, he's the one who's like morally correct here. Nagilum is correct. Yeah, if 2/3 of your crew can survive, they deserve that.
I think the Picard stuff, Picard in general, his actions, his motivations, are the worst part of this episode.
Mm-hmm.
The setting is good. The Nagilum stuff is good. Maybe the pacing at the very beginning isn't amazing, but I can forgive it. The Picard stuff is consistently logically baffling, and that's a big detriment in your mental character episode.
Mm-hmm.
We needed a countdown. We needed a physical countdown. Otherwise, there's no tension in the episode.
Right. Which, as you said, could have been done in a few different ways, of course. A few ways that, maybe would have given the rest of the people on the ship a little bit of agency or anything like that.
Anything. How did you like the sitcom ending?
How did it end again?
Picard says, "Okay, resume course to wherever the hell we were going before. Oh, and steer clear of any holes."
Oh, right. And everyone laughs and looks at the screen.
Yes.
Yeah. I didn't really pay too much mind to that. Obviously, it's a little bit of a throwaway line. I didn't find it funny or anything. Did it bother you?
I thought it was dumb. It didn't bother me more than the things I've already complained about, but I didn't like it.
Well, you have to add some levity to the end of it. Haskell's dead.
Thank God.
Yeah.
Anyway, overall, what'd you think?
Overall, it's one of those episodes that in the moment it's good, and then you stop to think about it, and it's like, I wish they did, anything else with certain aspects of it. It's worth a watch, though. I think.
I agree. I like it. I had a lot of missed potential, but overall it was good, and certainly coming out of season 1, this is much more indicative of where Trek would eventually go, rather than what came before.
Right. And I mean, like I said at the beginning of our conversation, I think I'm inclined towards these bottle episodes.
Yeah. I agree.
They always end up being. I mean, whenever you place restrictions on creativity, that's when the creativity really shines. So.
100%.
So I'm looking forward to more like this for sure.
If we just cut the budget in half, the show would be a lot better.
Well, what we should have done was we should have built another wheelchair after this one broke down, for $10,000.
Yeah, that's really, it works in so many ways that the director brings out the creativity of the actors, but the money spent on the wheelchair brings out the creativity of the director.
Right. It's a symbiote circle.
Indeed it is. By design.
So I guess we should move on to my question for you.
Give it to me.
Well, okay. So there was one little bit of trivia I wanted to point out, which isn't so much a question, but you know, we have Meanie back as the
Teleport
what's the word
guy.
I'm looking for? The teleport guy. Yeah. And I think it's Riker who calls him Lieutenant.
Yeah.
Despite him being an enlisted member, like he didn't go through Starfleet Academy,
Right.
you know, so he's not a lieutenant. So I don't know. I just found that I found that odd, and I think we go through a number of questionable statements about O'Brien's rank as the series goes on. I don't think they settled on anything until the very end of the show, actually.
Well, I mean, who cares, right?
I guess, but it's just something fun to keep track of, that's all.
The various ranks and positions he holds over the years.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, he already switched from wearing a red shirt to a yellow shirt.
Which is honestly kind of a sin.
Right.
He should have died.
He was in a prime position to die. He was with everybody in the encounter at Farpoint.
Yeah, you know, and he's an Irishman, so.
Right. They're like life's red shirts.
Right. What are you gonna do, though? What are you gonna do? We have a lot of time to spend with him, so we better get used to it.
Well, at least we can get excited for his Asian wife.
That's true. He's a creep just like us.
Based.
So here's my question for you.
Okay.
In 2020, Patrick Stewart gave his personal annotated copy of this script to which Democratic presidential candidate on the Jimmy Kimmel Live late night talk show?
There's so many layers to this question. Good God. Okay, so this episode where silence has lease to a Democratic candidate on Jimmy Kimmel. So
in 2020.
For anybody who doesn't know, 2020 was an election year.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. You want to just tell the audience what an election is?
Sure. An election is where the populace collectively operates under the illusion that they can do anything about their life, and casts votes into a void before accepting a result that may or may not actually matter to them.
Right. Yes. I couldn't have said it better myself.
So, is it a presidential Democratic candidate? That's the real question. Okay. Mm-hmm. Well, Obama can't run again. No, he can, but he didn't.
No, he can't. He can't run again.
No, you can. You can have 3 non-consecutive terms, I believe.
Oh, can you really?
I think so.
Oh.
They changed that in the latest patch.
Right. Oh, yeah, okay. I didn't read the notes.
Oh my God, who ran? I keep want to say Bezos, but that's the Amazon guy. What? And like it's like Bev DeVoe, but I think that's like an electronic artist.
Right. You're getting there. I mean, the sounds coming out of your mouth is pretty. They're pretty close.
Oh, good God!
I might give you half a point on this one.
Okay,
you're getting there.
Beverage? No, that's that guy. That's not.
You're getting so close.
What is his name? It's oh God, I'm losing my fucking mind. Bev. It's definitely.
You're just gonna say beverage again.
There's definitely a V in there. There's definitely a V.
There's no V. There's no
Lord.
V.
Belichick is the football guy. Oh no! I'm gonna lose.
No. Shall I tell you?
Billy, yeah.
Buttigieg.
Fucking hell.
But I want to give it to you just because I know who you were talking about.
Yeah.
You knew who it was.
Buttigieg, huh?
So yeah, so he now has Patrick's personal annotated copy of where Silence has Lease.
In a way that's better than winning the election.
Kind of, yes.
Yes. You can auction that off, get a cool, like, $250.
Couple hundred. Yeah, for sure. In fact, he probably already did.
Do you think Patrick Stewart voted for Buttigieg? Trick question. He can't vote. Got him.
I almost answered.
I couldn't leave the possibility that you would say, "Oh, Mitch, Patrick can't vote," because then I would look dumb.
Right, yeah, you would look stupid.
Right, so I had to get it in there. It was a gambit.
In front of all the ensigns.
You can't have that. Cannot have that. Well, I'll take my win. I'll even take it as a half win, but I'll take it. Makes me excited for the future. Maybe season 2 is when I post a winning record on trivia for the first time.
Yeah.
Well, join us next week, everybody, when we talk about episode 3, where Silence has Threes. And until then, everybody, please stay readier.
The troublesome little man-child.
Consider that in the history of many worlds, there have always been disposable creatures.
Do you consider yourself superior to us?
Should have told him to mind his own damn business.
When I stroke the beard thusly, do I not appear more intellectual?
Computer! Freeze program.
It's not a promising beginning.